They said the rifle wouldn't fire. They said it was too old, too rusted, too earth. They were still laughing when the walls melted. It started the way all big disasters do, with a mop, a mistake, and a man who stopped caring 5 years ago. Russ McAllister, former captain in the Terran Reclamation Unit, now professionally underpaid janitor, was humming the wrong national anthem while dragging his mop through Corridor 9 of Echelon Theta. The station smelled like alien breath and metal polish, a scent he'd grown weirdly fond of. Every Tuesday was trash day. Every Tuesday, the universe reminded him he was obsolete. The Galactic Syndicate had finally allowed Earth onto its interstellar trading platform, which mostly meant humans got to sweep the floors while 10-limbed bureaucrats and fish-scented commanders strutted around making decisions. Russ didn't mind. No one asked him to lead anymore. No one expected him to save anything. He had his mop, his closet, and a locked weapons locker that no one paid attention to. Until they did. Commander Threxian Vor of the Tresh Dominance League, a species best described as shiny purple jerks in armor, hovered into the corridor with 2 lieutenants. They weren't supposed to be there. In fact, the entire wing was being scrubbed due to an accidental pudding explosion caused by a diplomatic banquet gone wrong. But like all high-ranking aliens, Vor thought protocol was something for other species. He looked down at Russ, quite literally, with a sneer that rippled across his entire faceplate. "You there, human? This floor reflects you poorly." Russ gave him a 2-fingered salute. "Copy that, Commander Chrome Helmet." Vor's lieutenants chittered in amusement. Russ didn't care. He'd learned long ago that sarcasm was the only language that translated universally. Then the lights went out. Red emergency glows bathed the corridor in a hellish hue. Sirens blared, except on Echelon Theta. Sirens sounded like a goat being tickled underwater. The base AI screamed in 17 languages. "Hostile incursion detected." Repeat, "Hostile incursion detected." Threxian Vor barked orders, pulling his plasma staff from a holster on his back. His lieutenants formed up in a defensive triangle, weapons glowing with tri-phased energy. Russ just leaned on his mop and stared. He recognized this panic. He had worn it once, before time and war dulled his nerves. Something inside his chest shifted. Something old. Something rusted. "They're breaching the station," said the AI, somewhere between a whisper and a wail. Vor turned to Russ. "You, janitor? What is your combat level?" Russ didn't answer. He just dropped the mop, turned, and walked to the emergency locker behind maintenance panel 42B. The one no one opened. The one with the sign that said caution, sentimental crap inside. He pulled out the rifle. It was covered in dust, its barrel crusted, its scope cracked. It looked like it belonged in a museum labeled pre-failure era. Vor saw it and burst out laughing. "Is that a projectile weapon?" one of the lieutenants asked between snorts. "It uses combustion?" Vor waved his hand. "Let him have his toy. This will be amusing. Human, aim your ancient relic at the corridor. Perhaps the intruders will surrender from laughter." Russ didn't answer. He felt the rifle vibrate slightly in his hands. Not a mechanical vibration. Something deeper. Familiar. Like an old friend waking up from a nap. "Boomer," he whispered. The rifle hummed. Threxian rolled his many eyes. "Are you praying to it now?" Russ aimed it. The hallway in front of them shuddered as unknown footsteps echoed in. They came into view, 6 Syndicate shock reapers, covered in acid plating and energy shields. The real kind. The kind that vaporized defenders and spat on diplomacy. Vor and his lieutenants raised their weapons. Russ didn't. He pulled the trigger. The sound was not a bang. It was more like a piano getting punched through a tuba underwater. The air twisted. The walls flickered. One of the reapers was erased, not exploded, not shot, just unmade. The other screamed, a sound no human ear was meant to hear, and began to convulse. Vor stared in horror. "What is that?" Russ lowered the rifle. "Still rusty. Still smoking. They didn't make it on Earth," he said quietly. Boomer made a groaning noise like a metal yawn. One of the lieutenants dropped his weapon and backed away. It didn't kill them, Russ said, stepping forward slowly. It disassembled them. Atom by atom. In reverse. Like they never even showed up. Vor regained his voice. That's impossible. No Terran technology can. It isn't Terran, Russ said, stepping over the melted flooring where one of the Reapers used to stand. It's older than Earth. Older than your war. You just never recognized it because it's ugly. Vor didn't answer. He activated his emergency beacon and disappeared in a teleport shimmer, abandoning his lieutenants. Coward, muttered Russ. One of the Reapers, the last one not yet vanished, was crawling backward, half of his armor reversed in time, his limbs shrinking in on themselves like a crumpled paper model. He begged in his own tongue. Russ didn't shoot again. Boomer purred in his hand. And in that moment, Russ McAllister remembered something he had long buried. He didn't stop caring because he was tired. He stopped caring because everyone else told him his kind of caring was outdated. Useless. Obsolete. But Boomer disagreed. The corridor was quiet now. Emergency lights flickered off. The AI came back online with a cough. Welcome back, it said dryly. Russ turned toward the elevator and slung Boomer over his shoulder. I think I need to talk to someone in charge, he said. From behind him, a gelatinous blue creature peeked around the corridor. Are you the janitor who erased the Reaper? Russ blinked. Depends who's asking. The blob wobbled forward. I'm Gleep. You just became Syndicate Priority Number 1. And my new roommate. Russ sighed. Great. Tuesday was trash day, after all. Russ McAllister had never wanted fame. He once told a bartender on Series 9 that the only spotlight he liked was the one on the floor buffer. That bartender later sold that quote to a tabloid that ran a headline reading, Janitor turns hero, still smells like mop water. After what happened in Corridor 9, fame wasn't optional. His name was now circulating in over 60 galactic sectors, translated poorly into dozens of dialects. On a planet in the Vintak Belt, a religious cult had already carved his face into a potato-shaped moon. He didn't even like potatoes. 2 hours after the incident, Russ was locked in a debriefing room surrounded by both Earth Defense brass and Galactic Syndicate officials. They all stared at Boomer, which now sat on the table between them, rusted and smug. Boomer hadn't spoken out loud, but Russ could swear it was enjoying itself. Every time someone reached for it, the lights dimmed and static tickled the air like an angry thundercloud waiting for permission. The brass didn't dare touch it. One Syndicate commander called it a war crime in waiting. A human general called it a lucky accident. Russ called it his lunch break. Celine Tran was the only person in the room not posturing or flinching. She leaned back, arms crossed, glasses glinting with suppressed judgment. She was the station's top weapons theorist, and unfortunately for Russ, she knew exactly who he was. Her stare could have fried an egg. Or at least curdled some milk. Russ avoided her gaze and instead tried to tune into the argument between the Earth Defense lead, General Cormac, and a Syndicate ambassador shaped like a neon spider. He can't be trusted with it, the ambassador hissed. He's the only one it responds to, Cormac barked. He's a janitor. He's a war hero. He smells like floor wax. He vaporized 6 Syndicate Reapers with 1 shot. Boomer hummed faintly. Celine finally stood. Enough. It's not about what he is. It's about what the rifle is. That thing isn't a weapon. It's a relic. Possibly sentient. Possibly dangerous. Definitely broken in ways I don't understand. And it seems to like him. That's more concerning than anything else. Russ raised a finger. I'm still in the room, folks. They ignored him. Boomer let out a long creaking sound, like a cat stretching after a nap. The lights flickered again. The council ended in the usual mess of threat assessments, emergency protocols, and 2 species almost declaring a slap fight. In the end, they assigned Russ a handler, which he immediately objected to. Then they introduced said handler. It was Gleep. I prefer the term situational roommate, Gleep said cheerfully as he oozed into the janitor's quarters. Russ dropped his mop and glared at the blob currently trying to form a bunk bed using its own body mass. "You're a spy," he said flatly. Gleep jiggled. "No. Maybe. Okay, yes, but only part-time. They want me to monitor you. I also brought snacks." A tentacle reached out of Gleep's torso and offered Russ a small blue cube. Russ stared at it. "What is this?" "Compressed sugar. Possibly a personality stabilizer." The label was smudged. Russ tossed it over his shoulder and slumped into his hammock. He glanced at Boomer, who was now resting on a hook made for brooms. The rifle seemed perfectly at peace. A little too peaceful. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he muttered to it. Boomer didn't answer, but the lights in the room dimmed to a cozy orange. Gleep rolled closer. "You do know that rifle's not of Terran origin, right?" Russ didn't look up. "I figured. Terran rifles don't usually dissolve physics when they get annoyed." The blob leaned closer. "What do you know about the builders?" Russ squinted. "That's a myth. A bedtime story they told us in survival school. A race so advanced they made tech that worked on emotion. Tools that could rewrite atoms based on willpower. Weapons that only functioned when you truly meant it." Gleep's surface darkened. "They weren't a myth. And that rifle is builder-made. You're carrying a piece of a dead empire. One that the Syndicate wants buried." Russ looked at the rifle. "So why hasn't someone taken it from me?" Gleep paused. "Because it won't let them. And because it's choosing you. Which means someone important is probably going to want you erased." Russ sighed. He hated being important. The next morning came with alarms. Not the friendly kind. The entire station shook as a wormhole breach tore open Sector 6. Russ barely had time to grab his pants before Boomer launched itself off the wall and floated into his arms. "That's new," Russ muttered. Gleep screamed something about emergency response and turned into a bouncing cube, ricocheting toward the hangar bay. Russ followed, rifle in hand, trying not to panic as entire walls folded inward like paper. Reapers were back, and this time they brought big toys. Celine was already in the bay, shoving crates into a shuttle. Her face lit up when she saw Boomer, though she tried to hide it. "You're coming with us," she said. "Where?" "Earth. That's where this all started. And that's where we find out what Boomer really is." Boomer shuddered in Russ's grip. For a moment, it felt like it was scared. He didn't like that. He was used to weapons being predictable, controllable. This one had moods. And secrets. As the shuttle peeled out of the station, dodging blasts and screaming signals, Russ looked back one last time. Echelon Theta was burning. His mop was probably vaporized. That annoyed him more than it should have. Gleep sat in the co-pilot's seat, playing with buttons. Celine was at the helm, tense, silent. Boomer rested across Russ's lap, humming low. Below them, Earth rotated slowly into view. It looked peaceful from up here. That would change. "So what's the plan?" Russ asked. Celine didn't look at him. "We find out what the rifle wants. And then we find out if you can stop it from wanting more." Russ leaned back, rifle warm in his hands, a blob singing show tunes in the cockpit, and a brilliant woman who didn't trust him 2 inches. He wasn't sure what was scarier, the aliens, the rifle, or the fact that for the first time in years, he didn't feel useless. Boomer purred. Earth loomed. Earth didn't look the same. From space, it still spun blue and green, clouds drifting lazily over its surface like nothing had changed. But the Earth Russ McAllister returned to wasn't the one he left behind. It was shinier now. Polished. Sanitized in that unnerving Syndicate way, where culture was curated like a zoo exhibit and history was compressed into digestible, marketable chunks. As the shuttle pierced through orbit, Russ watched holographic billboards float across the atmosphere, selling galactic snack bars with slogans like "Taste the Universe" in every bite. Somewhere over what used to be Canada, a volcano glowed neon pink. Russ sighed. Celine hadn't spoken much since the launch. She was busy syncing the shuttle's landing codes with Earth's new planetary AI, which sounded like a British butler that had been lobotomized. Gleep sat beside her, rapidly shape-shifting through various forms of luggage to avoid customs scanners. Russ sat quietly, one hand resting on Boomer, the other clenched into a loose fist. The rifle was behaving oddly. It was vibrating in strange rhythms, not like nervous energy, but almost like anticipation. It wasn't afraid. It was excited. That unsettled him. They landed in what was once Nevada, now renamed Sector Terra Zeta. The Syndicate had bulldozed most of the desert and replaced it with glass-paneled towers, floating railways, and giant insect sculptures that hummed softly when touched. Everything smelled faintly of citrus and ozone. Gleep wobbled down the ramp cheerfully, taking in the sights with the enthusiasm of a tourist who had never been shot at. Russ wasn't impressed. He'd fought in this dust. The Battle of Black Dune Ridge had reduced 3 miles of this very land into charred rubble. Now there was a smoothie stand where his squad once made their last stand against the Dronak artillery unit. He pointed it out to Celine. "They make great mango bloodfruit fusion now," she replied without looking up from her tablet. Progress. They were met at the base of the landing pad by 2 Syndicate security bots and a nervous human with too many badges on his chest. He introduced himself as Director Simmons, head of Interplanetary Artifact Management. Russ noted the tremor in his voice when he looked at Boomer. The bots wouldn't even come near them. That was new. "We've cleared Lab Theta for your arrival," Simmons said, leading them through a tunnel that curved beneath the Earth's surface. "We believe the artifact, your rifle, may have originated from Sector 0. It's the oldest recorded area affected by builder tech. We've kept it sealed for decades. Too dangerous. And now we're just strolling in," Russ muttered. Celine gave him a sharp glance. "The rifle wants something. We either find out what that is, or we wait until it takes control of you and figures it out for itself." Russ rolled his eyes but said nothing. Boomer pulsed again. Almost impatiently. Lab Theta was buried under 2 kilometers of Earth, reinforced with quantum alloy and outdated optimism. They passed security gates, DNA scanners, and one particularly rude jellyfish-like AI that insulted Russ's haircut. At the final checkpoint, they were given suits to protect them from ambient radiation. Russ refused his. Boomer had stopped pulsing, which he took as a sign things were about to get weird. The chamber was round, vast, and dead silent. In the center, encased in a stasis field, was a large object that looked like a collapsed star had been molded into the shape of a throne. It pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heart. Celine approached with caution. Gleep kept a 10-foot distance and clung to Russ's ankle. "That's Builder," she whispered. "No doubt. We've only seen fragments. This is whole. Complete. Untouched." Boomer began to glow. Not brightly, but with a low, steady hum that vibrated through Russ's chest. He took a step forward. "Russ, wait," Celine said. He didn't. The hum intensified. Symbols flared to life on the rifle's side. None of them made sense. The stasis field around the throne flickered, then vanished. Celine swore under her breath. Gleep melted halfway into the floor. The throne shifted. Not mechanically. It reassembled, like its atoms were reconsidering their priorities. From within it, a voice emerged. It wasn't sound. It was thought. Pure, ancient thought. "We remember you." Russ staggered. He heard it inside his skull, like a memory he'd never lived. "You were there when the gate fell." Russ fell to one knee. Visions flooded his mind. He saw stars collapsing, cities built in a single heartbeat, beings made of pure geometry. The builders. Not gods, but close enough. And he saw Boomer. Not a rifle, but a key. A shard. A remnant of something that broke the rules of creation. Celine grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back. Russ didn't move. The throne continued. "The weapon you carry is not just ours. It is yours. Shaped by your grief. Sharpened by your fury. Cooled by your surrender. It sleeps until it is needed." Russ found his voice. "Needed for what?" The builder's voice trembled. To stop what we began. The chamber trembled. A crack formed in the floor. Not physically. Cosmically. A line in space twisted open like torn fabric, revealing another realm. Dark. Shifting. Full of silhouettes that moved wrong. Boomer snapped upright in Russ's grip. It fired. There was no trigger pull. No aim. Just intention. The chamber exploded with light. The crack sealed. The voice faded. Celine was breathing hard, staring at Russ like he just punched a star out of orbit. What did you just do? Russ stood, panting. I don't know. Gleep peeked out from behind a console. That wasn't a throne, he said quietly. Russ looked at him. It was a lock, Gleep said. And you just used the key. They left Lab Theta in silence. Simmons tried to stop them, but the look on Celine's face made even the security bots take a step back. Back aboard the shuttle, Boomer settled down again, warm and sleepy. Russ didn't speak for a long time. Celine finally broke the quiet. So we know what it is now. A key, Russ said. And a weapon. And maybe a problem. Gleep curled into a small sphere near the cargo hold. I vote we throw it into a sun. Boomer twitched, and the shuttle lights flickered. Gleep corrected himself. A small sun. Gently. Russ stared out the window. The stars weren't comforting anymore. They were waiting. Watching. He felt it in his bones. Something had been unlocked. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't just the guy with the mop. He was the guy with the key. And every door in the universe had just started whispering his name. They didn't make it halfway to orbit before the blockade caught them. 4 Syndicate dreadships emerged from cloak above Earth, slicing through space like silent predators. Russ was in the middle of asking Celine if the coffee dispenser on board actually worked when the alarms started howling and Gleep turned into a perfect sphere of stress and mucus. Shields went up. Warnings flared red across every panel. Celine didn't curse, which worried Russ more than if she had screamed. She just clenched her jaw and muttered that they were early. That made Russ blink. Wait. You were expecting this? Celine didn't answer. The shuttle jolted as something heavy exploded nearby. Russ nearly bit his tongue in half. Gleep was already navigating emergency routes through every escape protocol known to 9 species. Russ tightened his grip on Boomer, which, as usual, seemed eerily calm despite the weapons targeting them from space. Outside, the dreadships weren't firing yet. They were surrounding them. Hurting them. Which somehow felt worse. They want the rifle, Celine finally said. Or you. Or both. But they're not going to ask nicely. Why not just beam me into space and be done with it, Russ asked, sliding into a seat as she initiated evasive maneuvers. Because they can't, she said. Not without breaking treaties they helped write. Taking you down publicly would make them look unstable. They'll corner us, then sabotage the ship and claim we malfunctioned. Plausible deniability. Galactic politics. It's all very polite murder. Russ didn't like polite murder. He preferred when he knew who was shooting at him, and why. Preferably while yelling. But this cold, clean precision was terrifying. Boomer began to hum again, low and steady. Not agitated. Not angry. Focused. Outside, the dreadships adjusted formation. Their cores pulsed violet. Russ recognized the glow. Reaper-class gravitic anchors. If they activated those, they could pull the shuttle into one of the ships without firing a shot. They're not messing around, Russ said. They're never messing around, Celine snapped. And we're out of time. Strap in. She didn't wait for a response. She slammed the console, rerouted power from environmental systems, and punched the shuttle straight through a decompression vector. The ship shuddered. Gleep screamed in 6 different languages. Russ swore he could see the stars stretch sideways. The shuttle dove beneath one dreadship, skimmed the magnetic plating of another, and then slipped through a radiation belt so thick Russ thought his eyebrows might melt off. He couldn't breathe. Not from G-forces. From the fact that Boomer was glowing so brightly it hurt to look at. The rifle was vibrating like a tuning fork hit by God. Then it fired. There was no aim. No trigger. No conscious choice. It simply fired itself. And one of the dreadships disappeared. Not exploded. Not disintegrated. Gone. As if something had erased it from the universe's sketchbook. The space where it had been twisted inward briefly, then healed like stretched skin. Russ blinked. Celine gasped. Gleep stopped screaming long enough to whisper that reality didn't like that very much. The other dreadships immediately scattered. Not in fear. In synchronization. Their response was surgical. One began deploying drones. Another activated time-phase dampeners. The third initiated a gravity well that bent local physics so hard the stars warped around them. "We can't fight that," Celine whispered. Boomer hummed again. It disagreed. Russ suddenly felt very small and very tired. His trigger finger twitched. But he didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, he spoke. "You said something in that builder chamber unlocked. If Boomer's not a weapon, not just a key, then what is it?" Celine was about to answer when the ship jolted again, and something like fire crawled across the exterior in reverse, peeling sound out of the air. Russ gritted his teeth. "We're going to have to go dark," Celine said. "Find somewhere they won't follow us." "Like where Russ asked?" "The grocery store on Mars, because I'm pretty sure they've got eyes there too." Celine didn't smile. Her fingers flew across the console. Then she looked at him. "There's a planet in the null expanse. No name, no charts. The builders had outposts there. Maybe answers?" "That's a maybe I don't like," Russ muttered. But Boomer hummed again. As if agreeing with Celine. So that's where they went. Out past Pluto, through the edge of map space, and into the dark where stars dared not shine. The journey took days. Gleep cycled through panic and denial, settling eventually into a state he called active dread. Russ cleaned Boomer, not because it needed it, but because he needed something to do with his hands. Celine ran simulations on the fragments of data pulled from the Builder throne. She looked more and more pale with every passing hour. Eventually, the dark swallowed the stars. There was no up or down. No light. No sound. Just cold and nothingness. And then, something else. A planet appeared. Not in a dramatic swirl of light, not hidden by cloaking. It was just there. Plain. Gray. Rocky. Uninhabitable by any known standard. But Boomer pulsed again. This was it. They landed near what looked like ruins, but felt wrong. The architecture shifted when you weren't looking. Lines curved into impossible angles. Shadows moved independently of light. Gleep refused to leave the ship. Celine and Russ stepped into the silent graveyard of an empire lost to time. In the center of the ruins stood a spire. From a distance, it looked like stone. Up close, it shimmered like liquid metal wrapped in memory. Russ reached out. Boomer lifted itself from his back and floated forward. The spire responded. Symbols ignited. Builder runes, similar to those on Boomer, etched themselves in the air. And then a door opened in the spire's surface. Inside was not a chamber, but a sky. Infinite. Stars inside a room. "It's not a planet," Celine whispered. "It's a vessel. A living archive." They stepped inside. Russ felt his heart skip. The space within was vast and layered with voices. Not audible, but felt. Whispers of long-dead gods explaining secrets to the curious. Boomer floated beside them, more alive than ever. At the center of the chamber hovered another rifle. Identical to Boomer. It was cracked. Dim, dormant. Celine approached it. This was the prototype. Or maybe the twin. Something went wrong. That crack, it was used. Russ stared at it. The idea of more than one Boomer unsettled him deeply. Then the walls shifted. A recording played in light. It showed a being. Builder but dying. Holding Boomer's twin. Facing a wave of blackness that consumed stars. A darkness not of matter but meaning. The end of stories. The collapse. The voice returned. The same as before. We built them to guard the doors. But one was not enough. Russ looked down at Boomer. The hum was now a pulse. A call. Celine turned to him, wide-eyed. They didn't just make weapons. They made responsibilities. Russ didn't want a responsibility. He wanted to mop floors. But the universe didn't care. The builder voice spoke one final time. The darkness is waking. And you are the last sentinel. Russ swallowed hard. Then turned to leave. And the other rifle opened its eye. The moment the other rifle opened its eye, Russ knew something was wrong. Not just odd or confusing or builder-level strange, but wrong in the way your bones know before your brain does. The light inside that weapon was sick, flickering like a star about to collapse. It glowed a deep crimson, not like fire or heat, but like fury made tangible. Boomer responded immediately, rising in the air beside Russ, pulsing steadily like a heartbeat bracing for war. The air inside the builder archive turned sharp, electric, like the space itself could smell the tension. Celine reached instinctively for Russ, but he stepped forward without thinking. He wasn't in control anymore, not entirely. Part of him was, yes, but part of him had merged with Boomer so deeply that he didn't know where the rifle ended and he began. The cracked rifle floated in the center of the chamber, unmoving, yet radiating aggression. It was older, or maybe it had simply seen more. Boomer vibrated in warning, as if telling its sibling to back down. The other rifle responded by splitting apart. Not in pieces. In intent. It unfolded itself into forms that shifted with every blink. Blades. Spikes. Orbs. Shapes that shouldn't exist. The kind of geometry that made your stomach twist and your sanity flicker. And then it spoke. Not like the builders. Not like Boomer. This one didn't whisper in your mind. It screamed directly into your soul. You failed, the voice roared. You abandoned the post. You let the dark grow. Russ staggered, clutching his head. It wasn't pain. It was memory. A flood of lives he hadn't lived. Soldiers who had carried that weapon. People who had died holding the line against a force beyond reason. That weapon, Boomer's twin, had not been dormant. It had been punished. Sealed. Forgotten. Left alone in the dark to rot. Celine fired a warning shot from her sidearm. The blast passed harmlessly through the air, dispersing against some invisible shield. The corrupted rifle pulsed brighter. We were made together, it said, its voice deeper now, calmer. One to remember. One to forget. But they forgot both of us. So I remembered. I remembered everything. Russ stepped forward again, this time willingly. What are you? The twin weapon tilted, almost curiously. I am the truth you run from. I am the final form of duty without mercy. I am what you will become when the stars go silent. Boomer rose beside Russ, trembling with restrained force. Then it shifted. Its shape extended, curled slightly inward, forming something almost ceremonial. It wasn't preparing to fight. It was preparing to plead. Russ understood then. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a test. A moment that determined whether the line would be held or broken forever. The builders hadn't just made weapons. They made choices. And this forgotten twin had chosen vengeance over vigilance. It had waited in the archive, watched the universe falter, and now it wanted to reclaim its purpose through force. Russ turned to Celine. You need to get out of here. She shook her head. Not happening. Whatever this is, it's happening to both of us. Leap's voice crackled over the comms from the shuttle. Guys, not to rush your mysterious weapon drama, but those Syndicate dreadships? They're back. And they brought friends. Like moon-sized friends. Russ closed his eyes. Of course they had. He turned back toward the corrupted rifle. You want to be used again. Fine. But not like this. The rifle surged forward, faster than thought. Boomer intercepted it midair, the impact sending a shockwave through the chamber that cracked the floor and made Celine stumble. Russ felt the recoil in his teeth. The weapons circled each other, energy arcing between them like lightning from a split atom. But Russ didn't move. He understood now. This wasn't about killing. It was about proving who deserved the burden of being the last sentinel. Boomer wasn't trying to destroy its twin. It was trying to redeem it. The corrupted weapon screamed again. No redemption. No return. Only balance. Only blood. Russ stepped into the path of the twin as it dove toward him. He didn't raise Boomer. He opened his arms. The corrupted weapon stopped inches from his chest, vibrating violently. Its energy flared, threatening to burn him away. But Russ didn't flinch. You're angry. I get it. But we're still here. The line is still here. You don't have to burn everything to prove you were right. The weapon hesitated. Behind him, Celine shouted something, but Russ couldn't hear her anymore. There was only the weapon and the silence between stars. You were forgotten, Russ said. And maybe that's the worst thing that can happen. But I remember now. I remember you. And that means you're not alone. Boomer floated beside him, pulsing gently. The twin rifle trembled. Then, slowly, its light dimmed. Its shape reformed. Sleeker. Simpler. The rage faded from its glow. And then, with a sound like a deep sigh, it dropped to the floor. Russ collapsed to his knees. Celine was at his side in seconds. Are you okay? He nodded. Just tired. Gleep's voice came again, panicked. Hi, not to interrupt your emotional moment, but those ships are powering up weapons. You might want to come back now. Or forever hold your space piece. Russ stood, picking up the now dormant twin rifle. It didn't resist. It felt lighter. Like it had finally let go of something heavy. Back on the shuttle, the dreadships loomed. Weapons charged. Celine fired up the engines, and Russ stood at the viewport with both rifles on his back. Boomer hummed softly. The twin was silent. And then, in perfect unison, they activated. A field expanded from the shuttle, massive and spherical. It pulsed outward, bending space around them. Not an attack. A statement. The rifles were no longer relics. They were warnings. The dreadships paused. Calculated. Then slowly, one by one, they powered down. The shuttle passed through them like a ghost through a graveyard. Gleep exhaled so hard he deflated. I take back everything I said about humans. You're terrifying. Russ leaned back against the wall, eyes closed. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt responsible. Like the quiet between storms. Celine sat beside him. You're more than a janitor now. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, maybe. But I still miss my mop. Outside the viewport, stars blinked into view again. Distant. Silent. Waiting. And somewhere, beyond the veil of known space, a shadow stirred. The line had held. For now.